Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, since we got the verdict, we got the Kohberger pleading guilty, more evidence has been pouring forth that we just never heard about before this. And that was largely because we all know of the gag order. But a lot of this evidence came out via rumor during the case. And much of the rumors that we heard about turned out to be absolutely true. So I'm a little suspect of that. And now we would always say, myself and Mike Geary and Phil Grimaldi would always say on this show, you know, they have a lot more evidence than they're talking about, because everyone kept pointing to, oh, if it's not on the court documents, it didn't happen. Bullshit, it didn't happen. Detectives do what's called a complaint follow-up. And every time they talk to someone, they must type out a complaint follow-up to document what that person told them. And Dylan Mortensen gave them gold. Some of the things we're going to discuss it tonight that she spoke to detectives about and is just coming out now. But it was out in rumor somehow. And of course, it was always rumored that Kohberger, BK, let's call him, was after Madison Mogen. And we now learned that he may have been targeting Kaylee Gonsalves. So at this late time, when the investigators knew about this all the time, they had no obligation to tell us, to tell the public. But now that it's out there, I find their secretiveness to be a little strange at this point. Like, none of these guys, I saw the lieutenant, the captain, and then they had Bill Thompson on a TV show. And they basically said nothing. These were guys, the lead investigators, or helped run this investigation, and they told us nothing. What are they holding back now? And that's why I and many of my co-hosts on this show point to some political bias in this case. Some politics behind the scene is holding back information for the good of Moscow, Idaho, and the University of Idaho. They want this case, even the memory of this case, they want it the hell out of their town. So we're going to discuss some of this tonight, but some really good information has come out. So folks, all I can say is hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your cup of coffee, hold on to your thoughts. We're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. FanDuel on the Believe Network is now the new sponsor of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. FanDuel is a legal and regulated online sports betting platform operating in the United States. It allows users to bet real money on the outcomes of sports events across major leagues such as the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, and more. FanDuel also offers daily fantasy sports and online casino games in certain states. What FanDuel offers: Sportsbook, bet on sports games and player props; daily fantasy sports, draft a lineup under a salary cap and win based on player performance; casino, online slots, blackjack, roulette, etc. in select states; live betting, place bets in real time during games. FanDuel, the new sponsor of Police Off the Cuff. Joining me tonight, my co-host, the man of reason, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, former NYPD sergeant, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good to see you. Thank you for having me on tonight.
You know, Mike, as I said in my monologue, a lot of the stuff that's coming out right now, we knew via rumor, but it was never confirmed because of the gag order. But now we're getting information that is downright scary about how much we knew when this was never put out there. But now that is allowed to go out there and the gag order is off, you would think that the investigators, the lieutenant who was running this investigation, the captain who they appeared on several TV shows, and of course, Bill Thompson, they would tell us a little bit more than they're telling us. They're basically still tight-lipped as all hell, and I find that a little bit bizarre. Your thoughts?
Yeah, nobody wants to be quoted. These are guys that are lead detectives, very responsible jobs. They even have, I think, the new chief of the Moscow, Idaho Police Department there, and they're all staying as tight-lipped as possible. They're letting the documents go out because they have to. Judge Hippler's letting the documents be released, but they're not. When they go for interviews, they're not adding to it. They don't want to be quoted. They don't want to actually give reporters a deeper understanding of the case. Whatever the reporters ask, they look around at each other. Is it okay if I say something? And you get the idea. They're giving you almost monosyllabic answers that basically they really don't want to talk to you. They're doing it pro forma, but it's sad because these are people who have so much information, but they want the case to die as soon as it can, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be quoted. They don't want anything that they may say be taken out of context and blow up. You never know. They're in damage. It's almost like they're in damage control in a way, trying to keep a lid on everything while all the on the top of everything, while all the documents start pouring out the sides. It's the public will know this, but they won't help you understand it, and that I find a little irresponsible.
Mike, I would love to have Scott Rouse come on and read the body language of
Right.
Bill Thompson, the lieutenant and the captain from Moscow, and let him read whether they're using deception, whether they're just not saying anything. I would love him to read that because there's some reason they're not telling us anything. And these guys they should want to talk right now. Down the road, we all know this case is going to be the subject of books, movies, whether anyone likes it or not. So these fellows that actually have firsthand knowledge of this case, they should be telling us what went on. They should be proud of their work. They got a conviction in one of the most gruesome murders in the state of Idaho's history. And yet they're almost not proud of their work. They're not talking about it. I find that to be quite bizarre.
Just think about it. All the work that they put in from November 13th, 2022 till the time they got him, December 30th, 2022. And then all the work that went on after that, all the other technical work, the DNA stuff, all the phone, geofencing and all the things that they had to go through, and all the witnesses they had to, and all the leads they had to track down, and all the places they had to search. You would think they'd want the public to know how much they did and say, look, if there's anybody who's a Kohberger out there, look what we got. Boom, 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 boom. We got these 15 things. And let me explain to you how good we got it, how good our investigators were, how good the FBI scientists were, how good the telephone people were, the geofencing technology. Maybe they want some trade secrets kept on the side. Maybe they don't want the perps to know. But it does seem like they should at least explain a little bit more than they are. They're not forthcoming whatsoever. And again, when you see that, it tends to drive people crazy. And then that starts up more rumors, which makes it even worse. So they're not actually helping the situation. They're kind of, questioning, why don't they speak? Why are they just relying on the documents to give them out and that's it? And then they won't help people put it all into context. I find that disconcerting.
I do too. Leona Leone, it's all about the college. Should have never torn the house down. Totally unacceptable, in my opinion. Leona Leone, I happen to agree with you. We spoke about that on numerous occasions. There's a couple right now, Heather Barnhart and Jared Barnhart. They're actually a married couple, and they run a company called Cellbrite, which did the digital work on BK's phone. And they've been talking now on Banfield. One of the things I found tremendously interesting, and you'll find it interesting too, because I'm going to play their interview, that BK on his phone had 18 contacts on his phone. I have 18 pizzerias at least in my phone, and you're talking about the entirety of his phone contacts was 18 people. His mother, his father, and his two sisters, there's 4 right there. So now he has 14 more. What were those? Is that quite bizarre in this day and age? You bet. This is Banfield with this couple that did the cell phone work on BK's phone.
Mother. Within 2 hours of the murders, he called his mother as he returned to the scene of the crime, not even 2 hours later. He called her 2 more times and all told spent 3 hours on the phone with her. Was this out of character? Was this a binge of calls to mom that you were able to identify on his telephone?
This was his normal behavior, reaching out to mother and father repeatedly. If one didn't respond, he would reach out to the other. He would constantly text them and call them starting as early as 5 or 6 in the morning, his time. And his parents were Eastern. And then also at night to almost talk him into going to sleep and being able to rest.
So, Jared, as I was looking at some of the text messages, I was I was just jarred by the way he referred to his parents. He texted them. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the wording is pretty close. Father, why is mother not answering the phone? Why is she not picking up, father? He called his parents formally by the names father and mother when speaking to them. Did you see that consistent throughout his text messages to his parents?
Yes, I did. It's eerie. It stands out from any other case that I've worked in that, just the terminology, the phrasing that he used there. I said exactly what you said in the intro. It's Bates Motel. It is this feeling of that movie and Mother, and it's just super eerie.
I just want to comment on this. This is real psychosis. I mean, this is a real psychopath. I mean, that doesn't mean he was incapable of pleading guilty. He's very capable. It's very different from insanity, being a psychopath. This guy's a nutcase, absolute nutcase, referring to his mother and father. He's 30 years old, mother and father, texting them 5 o'clock in the morning, staying on the phone with them for hours and hours. That is not normal behavior, Mike. When you add all the things together and you put this as a cherry on top, this guy is not well.
It's narcissistic and selfish behavior to expect that if you call up at 5 o'clock in the morning or anytime late at night, that you're going to talk to your parents and they're going to, talk to you and comfort you from whatever anxiety or whatever issues you're facing. I'm sure they probably have done this many times over the course of the time he was in college and graduate school at DeSales, during COVID when he was doing all his work, I think pretty much online. I think they probably were really happy that he went out to Washington to get him the hell out of the house. But then the problem is you've got this it's controlling behavior. I want to talk to you. Father, tell mother to pick up the phone. It is Bates Motel. It is really weird that he would expect that people would drop what they're doing and just get on the phone with them. And forever, how long it takes until he is finished talking to them, they have to suffer and listen to whatever he has to rant and raving or whatever the hell he's doing. That's really selfish, controlling, narcissistic behavior. And at this point, it is kind of odd, but it fits in with the kind of personality he has.
You know, Mike, I think it's much, much more than that. I think it's not just narcissistic behavior. It's he called both his parents after the murders, the morning of the murders, and then returns back to the crime scene. And he's on the phone talking to his mother. There's some deep, psychosis here. Let me go back to this, Banfield.
Yeah, I mean, I thought maybe I'm the only one, but I'm starting to get that vibe from you, from my colleagues, from people I've been talking throughout the day about this. Some people do use a formal name, but knowing what he's capable of now, knowing who he is, it just raises the hair on my arms. About the contacts in his phone, he called his father and mother as contacts in his phone. But what about other contacts, Heather? What about other text chains, other communications? Did this guy have any community of his own?
He had 18 personal contacts. 18. So think about all the people you meet and the hundreds of random numbers. And they were even identified as girl I ran with, second girl I ran with, a contact in parentheses, hair. But then there was mother and father and his sister and just a few others. 18.
And he's, he's in his 30s. Like this, that's unbelievable in this day and age. It is not unusual for people to have well over 1,000 contacts, many thousands of contacts at this stage in our lives. Everything is on our phones. Everything's digital. What about text chains? Did you see any communications with other people other than mother and father?
Not really. No, it was. I
Folks, just so you know, this is a couple named Heather and Jared Barnhart. They work for a company called Cellbrite. They did all the digital work on BK's phone, and they're speaking about that right now to Ashley Banfield. BK had 18 contacts in his phone. If that's not the most bizarre thing on this earth, that showing he has no friends, basically no friends, and he would refer to some of the people on his phone, girl I ran with, second girl I ran with, like didn't have their names. I mean, he's missing a few I think brain cells. That's what I'm trying to say. He's missing a bunch of those.
I couldn't name a single person that he communicated with other than just his parents. There was some one-off communications here and there, and there was some emailing and other things. But for texting, if you think of the friend that you sent a message to on a whim, there wasn't one single person like that.
And I know that we learned during the final hearings before he was sent packing to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution that he had done quite a job at scrubbing a lot of his devices. How good a job, and how were you able to get past some of what he thought he put over on you?
This was one of the hardest investigations I've ever worked in 23 years of looking at digital data. He cleaned up well. He knew how to use VPNs. He knew how to use incognito browsing. Where he messed up, downloads on his Android device. He also didn't consider the fact that even on a PC, if you delete, every contact leaves a trace. So we can see the files when you turn something off. We can see when you clear something. All of that was left behind for us.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation.
I wasn't quick enough to get to jump Andrew Cuomo. So pretty amazing. That tells a pretty big story there, that they were checking out his phone, of course, and 18 people in his phone, 18 contacts in his phone. If that isn't, like they said, Bates Motel-ish, I don't know what is. And then we start learning more information, specifically about some of the interviews that the detectives did. And one that they identify, it's clearly Dylan Mortensen, but they identify her as, unidentified witness. They don't put her name down. And she talks about how on the morning of the killing that she actually heard the killer, BK, refer to Kaylee Gonzalez by name. And this is the first time we are hearing this. So the police investigators have known this for close to 3 years right now. And this is the first time we were told that Bill Thompson lied. He absolutely lied. There's no evidence whatsoever that he was targeting anyone. Now we know that it's in the paperwork. It's in the detective's complaint follow-ups. Why is Bill Thompson lying, Mike?
But it doesn't really make much sense. But I think, he's trying to make his case. And Bobby Chacon mentioned this. So he's trying to actually hurt his case and tell people, we really didn't know who he was going after. It doesn't look like there was any sexual attraction, psychosexual component whatsoever. He probably went there to kill one, but he ended up killing four. The way Bill Thompson puts it, it's almost like he's degrading the value of his own case file and his own case. And so I think Bobby Chacon picked up on a really good point. But the fact is that we were thinking that it was Madison Mogen, most likely, or Xana Kernodle, because they worked at the Mad Greek restaurant. And that wasn't, and the fact that he stopped there twice, we had rumors about that early on, but it was never confirmed. And it was just left hanging out there, which is kind of disconcerting. So then we thought, okay, it's either it's maybe Madison, because that's the first bed we went into. It could be that now we look at it, he may have actually gone into Kaylee Gonzalez's bedroom, didn't find her there, and then went to Madison's bedroom and found her there. And that's where...
Well, Mike, they were staying in the same bedroom.
Right.
They were sleeping in the same bed, actually.
Bedroom? It was Madison's bedroom.
Yeah, they were sleeping in the same bed together.
Yeah.
So he obviously, that's the other thing. He obviously knew the layout of the house.
Yes.
He knew where the people were that he was looking for. He reconned that place, we can argue 23 times, 12 and a half times, whatever it was. It's probably more than 23 times. So he knew how to get in by the sliding glass door simply by watching, simply by reconnaissance. So all of those things we're finding out right now. Someone just asked me, what type of fresh evidence is there? Well, how about the digital evidence? Did you know about the digital evidence, ma'am, that asked this question? Physical evidence, the digital evidence that this couple just told us about, his 18 contacts in his cell phone, the fact that he turned his cell phone on or turned it off, turned it back on, the fact that he was texting and calling his parents the morning of the murders. Is that not new information? Is that not good enough for you? People are asking like we're making this stuff up. We are not making this stuff up. It is actually coming true here. In the weeks before Bryan Kohberger killed 4 University of Idaho students, there were strange happenings at 1122 King Road. One of the victims, Kaylee Gonzalez, told her roommates she saw a man she didn't recognize staring at her when she took her dog outside. Another time, the residents came home to find the door open, loose on its hinges. They grabbed golf clubs to arm themselves against a possible intruder. Those details were included in hundreds of documents released by police within hours of Kohberger being sentenced to life in prison Wednesday for the brutal stabbing of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin early on November 13th, 2022. It remains unclear whether the strange happenings had anything to do with the killings, but the documents do illustrate the frenzied efforts law enforcement to follow every possible lead to find and convict Kohberger. So this is new confirmed evidence. It was never confirmed. It was rumor. And Mike, what you alluded to before, the Greek restaurant that both Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan worked at, apparently his phone had gone on their Wi-Fi.
Twice.
Yes. So that was rumor. And is that not enough for Bill Thompson to confirm that he was following them? Is that not enough for him? What does he need? Pictures of him doing it? Video of him doing it?
Yeah, his excuse was it doesn't fit the definition of stalking under Idaho law. So he can't say that prisoner 163214 BK was actually stalking. But it doesn't make any sense because it's stalking behavior. And he's trying to denigrate his own case. He's trying to make it more palatable, politically palatable for the public to accept this is how the case will end, rather than say, we want to scalp Bill Thompson and put somebody else in there and charge Kohberger and let's go after him. What he did was ridiculous. No, he's trying to denigrate his own case because he's trying to make it more acceptable. But in doing so, he's stepping all over the facts of the case, and that we were rumored to be true and now have been confirmed, and then some through the document dump. I think he really wanted that document dump to stay, that the documents to be permanently sealed and not open to the public, because now he has a lot of splaining to do to the public, and the public isn't buying it.
100%. Curious happenings at 1122 King Road. Bethany Funk was one of 2 roommates to survive the night of the stabbings. In interviews after the murder, she told police that about a month earlier, Gonzalez had taken her dog Murphy outside when she saw an unknown man up above their house to the south staring at her. It was concerning enough that Gonzalez told everyone about it and called her roommates to ask if they'd be home soon. Then on November 4th, 9 days before the attack, the roommates came home at 11 a.m. to find the door open, loose on its hinges as the wind blew. Gonzalez was away at the time. Canoto's father fixed the door. On November 13th, police found a gruesome scene. Blood pooled on bed comforters, covered floors, and was splattered on the walls. One of the victims, Canoto, had extensive defense wounds. In her room, it was obvious an intense struggle had occurred, one officer wrote. Tips poured in. So we know the case, but we didn't know all of these different facts because the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, still is not telling us. He went on television and said there is no direct evidence that he was stalking any of these students, following or had any previous contact with any of them. I think let's call bullshit on that, Mike. That's absolute bullshit.
It is. And as someone pointed out in the chat, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. He's lying through his teeth, and he should be called out for that. Now, he doesn't have to worry. He's going to retire, but he should go out with a smack in the head and a kick in the ass, because that's what he deserves. Not a handshake. Somebody with a little bit more gumption should have had this case, but I know obviously there was a lot. We see this in New York City, the politics behind the case. Why, who do you charge? How do you charge them? What recommendation do you make at sentencing if they're found guilty? Who gets immunity and who gets put on the hot seat and get charged? It all comes down to that behind the scenes stuff. And Bill Thompson, with somebody with like 30 years experience, he certainly chose a strange case where all of this information was gathered. He probably had the strongest case that any prosecutor could have in this trial, and he just gave it all away. Doesn't, sad.
Well, I just don't know why he's not telling the truth. Terry K, thank you very much for the $5 super sticker. I really enjoy your live show. So in Kohberger's mind, he believes he did nothing wrong. I think he understands he did something wrong. I don't think he could control himself. I think he's what would have become a serial killer. He's a mass killer, a mass murderer. And we're now learning so many things that we didn't know. And now we've learned that is on a police, what we would call a complaint follow-up, that the killer, who we now know to be Bryan Kohberger because he pled guilty, said Kaylee Gonzalez's name during the attack. This is on Banfield.
Just be perhaps the most breathtaking piece of news to come out of what's been a flood of case files and court papers in the Bryan Kohberger, Idaho saga. A possible answer to the burning questions that Kohberger would not answer and authorities seemingly couldn't find out. Why that house? Why those victims? Who among them, if any, were specifically marked for death? Page 3, paragraph B of a new document from the Idaho State Police describes an interview with a surviving roommate. That's what they say, a surviving roommate who, from everything we know at this point, must have been Dylan Mortensen. And I want to read it specifically for you. Sometime in the early morning hours, Redacted was awoken and opened her room door and heard a male say, quote, "It's okay, Kaylee. I'm here for you," and crying. She then shut the door a short while later. She opened her door again and saw someone approximately 5'10" tall, dressed in black with a ski mask, standing in the kitchen. This is absolutely stunning information.
So this information, again, there were rumors of this stuff during the case, but yet there's been no confirmation by any of the investigators. Bill Thompson denied that there was any connection whatsoever between Kohberger and any of the victims in 1122 King Road. I find that to be disturbing. I don't know what he's doing. Why is he not telling the truth, Mike?
Bill, I think he's looking at the end of his career and coasting. He doesn't want to do the case. And I think the University of Washington and the University of Idaho, they both don't want this case to go on. They want it ended yesterday, would be, and it's kind of like the Son of Sam killing. Remember the Berkowitz case in the 70s? The name Kohberger will live on. And unfortunately for his family, they'll have to suffer with that. But Kohberger and the Idaho killings, the Idaho 4, those poor kids will always be known as the Idaho 4. And you'll never, ever, ever erase that for several generations. And they're going to have to deal with it. But they take the cheap, cowardly way out and say, just get rid of this, sweep this under the rug, get rid of it. When they should have said, look, these are our people. These are our students. We will do whatever we can to help. That house will stay in pristine condition. That house will be guarded. That's now ours because that person donated 1122 King Road to us. Because they are our students, we will make sure that house stays because that's how much we value the safety of everyone in this town. We will do everything we can. No, tear it down. Boom with the bulldozer. Couldn't be done fast enough.
Absolutely. Teeth of the British. Well, technically, there's no connection. Kohberger only knew the victims, but they didn't know him. Teeth of the British, I have to disagree with you. You're wrong, because much of an investigation is done by interviews of witnesses. And what the witnesses say to the detectives is memorialized on a complaint follow-up. That paperwork is used to refresh the memories of the witnesses in court, and their testimony will be weighed by jurors. So that's why I have to disagree with you, Teeth of the British. It absolutely 100% is evidence. And we didn't know about this evidence because the gag order. And now that we're finding out about it, I'm not happy because I think that Bill Thompson is still not telling the damn truth. Emily Parkinson, member for 9 months. I think the college has them under their thumb. Emily, I 100% agree with you. That's all I can get out of this. I think that someone's raising another issue in the chat. I think AVIF LVNJ. This story is bullshit. If Penn State covered up Sandusky, I'm sure U of I is capable of covering up a bad story here too. This is not a bad story. This is a story of what happened, a horrific quadruple murder. What the university is covering up is they're covering up that they don't want to lose any more enrollment because of this horrific event. And guess what? They can't erase this event. It happened. The quadruple murders happened. But they're trying to politically bury it faster. Don't we all want to honor these 4 students that lost their lives for no reason? But yet it would seem that the university and the town of Moscow, Idaho can't put this behind them fast enough so that people forget about these kids. Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. I don't think we should ever forget about them. But it seems that the university and even the investigators, they don't seem forthcoming to me. Look, I worked for 10 years in Manhattan North Homicide Squad, one of the premier homicide squads in the nation, not just in the city, in the state, in the nation. All right. So we would be all over a case like this. And after it was over, you couldn't stop detectives from talking to the press and talking about this case because they would have been proud of their work. But there's obviously some political force, and vis-a-vis, we all thinking it's the University of Idaho, stopping these investigators from talking about this case. And I can't say 100% it's them, but that's what I'm thinking it is.
According to a surviving roommate, the killer, Bryan Kohberger, used Kaylee Gonzalez's name before he ended her life. If that surviving roommate was right, he knew who Kaylee was. He knew where Kaylee lived. And it might just have been a targeted attack with Kaylee Gonzalez being the target, or at least one of the targets. Here's where I want to add some context, and it's important context. From the thousands of pages of case files that we have been reading since this crime was committed nearly 3 years ago, that surviving roommate, Dylan Mortensen, gave more than half a dozen interviews to the police after the murders. And while her story has remained really, really consistent, most of the answers that she gave about what she heard that night included hearing the words, "It's okay, I'm here to help you. It's okay, I'm here to help you," without Kaylee's name attached. So this is the first time we're hearing that at least one of her statements to the police included hearing the killer saying Kaylee's name. There is also this from Washington State University, where Kohberger was teaching as an assistant. He was pursuing his PhD in criminology. And we knew that he was unbelievably unpopular there. We knew that there was friction, especially with the female students and the female colleagues he had. But in these new documents that we've been able to obtain, they're still not public, but News Nation has obtained them. In fact, Brian Enton, my colleague, who's been working doggedly on this story for the last almost 3 years, was able to get these. We're told that a criminology professor issued a stark warning to other professors and other supervisors, a warning that Bryan Kohberger might just become a predator. And again, in these documents that our Brian Enton has been able to obtain, this is what this professor says. Kohberger is smart enough that in 4 years, we will have to give him a PhD. Mark my word, I work with predators. If we give him a PhD, that's the guy that in many years, when he is a professor, we will hear he is harassing, stalking, and sexually abusing. These were words that were spoken months before the murders.
Thank you for.
So, I almost got Cuomo. So, there were warning signs about BK, his behavior. Let's not forget he was a graduate assistant that was teaching students. scary teacher to have, right? Numerous complaints by his female students. They were afraid of him. Inappropriate behavior, not showing up to work on time, 15 minutes, half hour, hour late to class. So all of these things were warning signs. And this professor that was speaking was worried that this guy was going to become a PhD. And once he had his PhD, he was going to be even more dangerous because he would have access to all of these students. Mike?
Yeah, you would think that looking back, and we saw this with his master's professor, Dr. Rawlinson. She said he's brilliant and whatever, and she never saw I guess because they were really meeting online and in Zoom meetings and things like that. They never really had a lot of face-to-face interactions in person. She never really picked up on a lot of his issues. But that professor there, in real time, not just in hindsight, but in real time, picking out the fact that this guy's a really sick puppy and he's going to get a PhD and he'll have all this power and all this access to ladies. Now, remember, if you look at the timeline, he gets there, starts teaching in August. Within 2 weeks, he's got his first complaint against him from female students. He berates them. He loses control. He doesn't know how to act appropriately. He has no EQ going on. It's really sad. And there were red flags. I hate to use that term, but there were red flags. There were warning signs. And this professor picked up on it. Good for that professor, because that professor knew what they were talking about and saw somebody who was a real sick, dangerous person. And they try to say it in as academic way as possible, but what they were saying is absolutely 100% correct. This guy is a dangerous person, and they did end up eventually telling him that you're out of here. You're out of here. That was right around the time of after the homicides, but very short thereafter. They had him on the radar really quick, really soon. They knew this guy was not cut out for this kind of work. What they saw in him was not an earnest person trying to be a really great criminology student. What they saw was a predator, and kudos to that professor for saying that.
100%. Folks, this Police Off the Cuff real crime. If you would like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, make comments, and share us with your friends. If you want to contribute financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel memberships with 5 different levels, and you can join our YouTube family by signing up for that. In addition, we have a new FanDuel is our new sponsor over the Believe Network, the new sponsor for Police Off the Cuff. FanDuel, an American gambling company, offers sportsbook, daily fantasy sports, horse racing, and online casino services. Founded in Edinburgh, Scotland in 2009, it began as the news prediction site HubDub before transitioning to its current services. FanDuel is partnered with the NFL, NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, and PGA Tour, and operates FanDuel Racing and FanDuel Face-Off. FanDuel, the new sponsor of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. So, Mike, now some of the new things they're coming up with that they found out he was doing, just absolutely bizarre behavior. I'm going to play some of this from Law and Crime. And it's all of this, again, was rumored, but now it's been absolutely verified, his behavior.
This wasn't just someone who was like, hey, I'm interested in the case. He was going and downloading the Moscow press releases to his device.
Bryan Kohberger's secrets are being exposed by 2 experts who did a deep dive into his cell phone and computer, and what they uncovered is disturbing.
Lots of like flexing muscles, selfies, half clothed, like that. There's numerous instances of that on his phone.
I talked with the 2 investigators who pieced together Bryan Kohberger's digital trail and the things he couldn't erase, no matter how hard he tried.
Psychopathic paranoia and then studying serial killers into the looking to get rid of his car. He was nervous.
Plus, we're seeing new video of Bryan Kohberger returning home after committing the murders. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Bryan Kohberger, he believed he had thought of everything in his plan to carry out murder, and he really tried to cover his tracks when it came to his cell phone and his computer, but he may not have done a good enough job because 2 experts went through data from his phone and his computer and found evidence that would very likely have painted a damning picture of guilt had his trial moved forward. Those experts are Heather Barnhart and Jared Barnhart from Celebrate, and they're going to join me here very shortly. Celebrate is a firm that employs top experts from around the world in digital forensics. They analyze electronics and they testify at trials. And the things that Jared and Heather found, they're really going to creep you out. And those things could be part of what led Bryan Kohberger to ask for a plea deal earlier this summer. Kohberger pleaded guilty to murdering Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin last month. Kohberger is now serving 4 consecutive life sentences for the brutal killings. Kohberger was a criminology major at Washington State University, so he was studying crime and serial killers. One serial killer we've told you about that Kohberger was studying, Ted Bundy, who attended college in Washington, but then killed women in several states, including Utah, Colorado, and Florida. Bundy was caught after murdering sorority sisters in Tallahassee. But the Barnharts say that Bryan Kohberger was obsessed with other serial killers. When the Barnharts started digging, they found that Bryan Kohberger was searching for serial killer Harvey Glattman. He was a rapist in the 1950s who is known as the Lonely Hearts Killer. He also was called the Glamour Girl Slayer. Another was Robert Hansen, who kidnapped, raped, and murdered at least 17 women in Alaska in the 1970s and 1980s. Kohberger also searched for Tommy Lynn Sells, who was known as the Coast to Coast Killer and is believed to be responsible for more than 22 murders. But one of Kohberger's searches really jumped.
One of the questions I would ask again, and if this case went to trial, that digital evidence would have been very meaningful to show a jury, to show BK's state of mind.
Exactly.
Searching serial killers, not just one, but multiple. And was he trying to be like some of them? Did he admire some serial killers more than others? So that evidence that would have was collected by this husband and wife team, the Barnharts, that is what's called circumstantial evidence. And we've been selling that for the whole time we've been covering this case. And people, I'll use the term because it sounds funny, they poo-poo circumstantial evidence, even though circumstantial evidence can be some of the most powerful evidence that exists in a case, Mike.
Yeah, that evidence goes to show his state of mind, what he was occupied with. Now, we know he's a PhD criminology student and he's also doing TAing, but what did he download? How often was he downloading things? Was he downloading a textbook, getting a textbook on Amazon for about a serial killer? And he maybe had 5 of those in his dorm room. No big deal, to a student like that. But he was probably because he has an obsessive compulsive issue. He was probably downloading constantly images and any sort of thing related to these cases. And so it probably went far and above what you would expect from a criminology student. And what courses was he really teaching at the time? Was he downloading stuff on serial killers like Ted Bundy, or when the course he was teaching may have been a basic introduction to criminology course, or whatever it happens to be. What's the timing? What's he looking at? Does it make sense for what he's doing, or is it something he's going off on an obsessive, trip somewhere down a rabbit hole, which is probably, I think, what he was doing, because he can't control himself when he does this sort of stuff. But he goes out there on tangents. But yes, that shows absolutely his state of mind, which you're asking and it's circumstantial because the jury's hearing it. And the prosecution is trying to show that this was all about feeling like a serial killer himself. He not only wanted to study serial killers, but he wanted to be one. He wanted to feel what it was like. He wanted that power over women, controlling how they die, when they die, under what circumstances they die, what weapon you use. He wanted that. And so that is far and above what you would consider normal. So that shows what he's thinking. So therefore, you ask the jury to say, if a person is thinking like that, and then we have all these other things, the Elantra, the cell phone, all the DNA, put it all together. What do you think? Guilty or not guilty?
Well, that's a good point. And, all of this now, he never took it to trial. So much of this stuff, we didn't learn about it firsthand. Lucky from the chat. Professor and Sarge, it is being said, according to CBS, that BK has possession of his files, photos. Is this true? If you know, it's apparently true. And I don't know why, what law allows him to keep the crime scene photos. I just,
that's strange.
That is the most bizarre thing I have ever heard. He pled guilty. He should have no rights to any of those things. But we learn about how bizarre the law can be in certain instances. And, Timo Suoku, I don't know what you must be a Kohberger, but, I'm tired of Kohbergers already. And you have to be a moron to actually still be selling the Kohberger nonsense when this guy, BK, pled guilty. The evidence against him was overwhelming. So if you keep it up, I'm going to eject you into cyberspace, because it's really annoying to hear people that still believe this guy is innocent. Just absolutely, I'm going to put you in a timeout. I think you need a little timeout. But unbelievable to me that there's still people out there. Oh, the police framed him. Oh, he was framed. He didn't do it. There's no evidence. Dude, you should follow a different type of podcast if you really think that at this point.
Now, it's not unusual to be close to your parents, but Bryan Kohberger, for someone his age, talked a lot with his parents, both his mom and dad, and he was quite obsessed with his appearance. We'll have more on that later, too. So to discuss all of this, I would like to bring in Heather Barnhart and Jared Barnhart. They are both digital forensics experts at Celebrite, and Heather is also a fellow at the SANS Institute. So thank you guys both for coming on to talk with us about your work on the Idaho case.
Thank you for having us.
Heather, I'll start with you. When were you first approached about working on this case?
It was late spring of 2023 when the FBI reached out, seeing if I was interested in assisting.
Mm-hmm. And then, Heather, do you reach out to Jared and say, or do you go back to the FBI and say, I think Jared, he should be, working on the case too, or how does that work?
Well, I casually asked them, would you prefer 4 sets of eyes versus 2? And it was a laptop and a phone. So having us divide and conquer, I thought could be really helpful. And they said, absolutely, come in. And that's how it all started.
So Jared, where do you guys go from there?
So we went into the FBI office and just sort of got a little bit of the pulse of where the investigation was, some of the digital evidence that they had. And I mean, from there, you really have to take a slow look at which devices had they extracted data from. We had one Android phone and then a computer, and then understanding, what they had already done. Like they had already spent time and effort in looking at this evidence and then seeing where our expertise sort of fit and what we might be able to dig for.
Mm-hmm. The world can be a really scary and unpredictable place. And that's where our partner
time until it's purged. But when it's purged, depending on how it's overwritten, it can really be gone. And there are tools out there that will overwrite the data. So it is unrecoverable.
Mm-hmm. So we hear, in the news, we've heard in the past about programs, software, bleach bit, if you will. And I'm not saying that was used in this case, but we did hear that there was some high-end software, if you will, that Bryan Kohberger was using to, quote unquote, wipe his devices. Is that true, Jared? Is that what was going on?
No. And again, just speaking to the 2 devices that we participated in, if there was something on something else, maybe that's true, but that's not true for what we did.
Really?
Yeah. So for the Android phone, if you think of it more of not some fancy wiping software, but the user making decisions to dumb down connectivity and make his device less fruitful. Ultimately, he used incognito mode in Google Chrome to try to sort of obscure the records that could be recorded about his web history. You can manually go in and just clean things up, clear my history, like things like that. With some time, they do actually delete. But he turned off his Wi-Fi. And so making his device not able to look out there and beacon and talk to networks that he might have been near. He used NordVPN, which in and of itself, it's benign. It's not something that is necessarily a nefarious thing. Security conscious people use VPNs all the time. Sometimes people use VPNs to stream stuff from somewhere else in the world just for fun. But as you start to build this profile of all of the behaviors that he did, especially around the time of the crime, he set up his device to be dumb, minimally collecting data. And so as we started to tackle the evidence from the Android, it wasn't what's here, but very obviously what's not here, and then hyper-focusing on the minutes and hours before and after this void of time where his phone was powered off in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things I'd like to say, and many people may disagree with me, I think his parents knew. I think they knew he did these murders before he even got arrested. His father goes across country to drive with him from Washington State University to Pennsylvania. That sounds very bizarre to me. The fact that he was on the phone with them every day, the fact that he was on the phone with them the morning of the murders, something was not right there. And I feel that they knew a lot. They knew more. And of course, they will never admit to that. I think his parents knew.
Bill, you know, I was even talking to a member of my family about this today, and I opine that maybe he didn't confess to them, but I think in their hearts they thought he probably did it. His sisters were convinced that he had done it, and they talked to the parents. And supposedly there was a kind of like a little bit of an argument, a blowout over it. But I think his parents knew that there was a really good chance he might have been the killer. And I think because he's so obsessive about things and because he's so secretive sometimes about things, and he's out there and he's decompensating in his cocoon, maybe with his family, like the Bates Hotel. Long as mother's there, you know, everything's okay. But when he gets far away from mother and father, he starts to spin out into his own head, and he gets so, you know, ultimately compulsive. But I think they probably, in their hearts, probably kind of knew that they're looking for a tall guy, a single man with a white Hyundai. When that Hyundai was pictured, that white Hyundai early on, like 10 days after the homicides, I think they were pretty much creeped out and saying, you know, that's the biggest coincidence in the world. And, you know, they may have known in their hearts, I agree.
You know, everyone is fascinated over this, and this is video of BK in his prison cell, and everyone is infatuated with watching a criminal who's doing, life in prison without parole in his cell.
Joe Bryan Kohberger behind bars, and I've been trying to verify it all day. I've been going back and forth with sources and with the Department of Corrections. I finally just got a statement from them, which I'm going to read to you in a second. But first, I want to show you this video if you haven't already seen it. It basically looks like it's from a surveillance camera, and you can see what appears to be Bryan Kohberger in a cell, sort of standing there looking up at something, sort of looks around a little bit. You can see it looks like a mattress on the left side. He appears to be cleaning what I thought was a shoe. Then he puts the product, the little paper towel or whatever up. And it's a strange video. I mean, I had heard from other inmates who had been in cells with him before in the area that he was sort of, OCD and wanted everything clean. And you can tell he's going through some kind of process, kind of cleaning things and then looking up at something. But there's a lot that's unclear about the video. At first, I wasn't sure where it came from, confirmed that it did not come from Moscow, Idaho, from when he was in the Latah County Jail, confirmed that it did not come from the Ada County Jail. So that only leaves the max security prison in Idaho where he is now. And I just received a statement from them, and I've been trying all day to go back and forth to see what they have to say about this. And this is the latest statement from them. We are aware of the videos circulating online and are investigating the matter. Again, this is Idaho Department of Corrections. We're aware of the videos circulating online and are investigating the matter. While we cannot yet confirm the veracity of the videos, if verified, they are a clear violation of IDOC policy, and the parties responsible will be held accountable up to and including termination. We caution that some videos may be fake or AI enhanced. On July 23rd and again on July 25th, IDOC leadership sent 2 emails to staff reminding them of our policies and expectations concerning professionalism and the appropriate use of technology and social media. Videotaping and publicly sharing security footage is prohibited conduct, and we will be reviewing all legal options, including criminal prosecution. The safety and security of our staff and incarcerated population remain our top priority. So they seem to be concerned about this. I have sources who I've been talking to since this morning who told me that they were aware of it, that they were investigating, and it's serious. I mean, in all my time covering crime, I cannot remember an instance where I have seen a video like this of someone incarcerated and someone of this high profile. I think I've seen pictures get leaked out, but never a full-on video like this. And what it looks like to me is perhaps someone who works at the prison was videoing one of the monitors, one of the security surveillance monitors, and took the video on their phone and maybe sent it out to someone, whatever, ended up on social media, and now it's pretty much everywhere. So it's now to the point where the Idaho Department of Corrections is responding to the video. In terms of the behavior that you see Bryan Kohberger exhibiting in the video, that doesn't really surprise me. Again, sort of the OCD tendencies, things that I've heard about him from other inmates. I want to read for you, let's grab my glasses here. So remember all the new police reports that I got? I did a video on them yesterday. I don't think anyone else has gotten them yet, but I basically got 600 pages of police reports from the Idaho State Police, everything that they had connected to the Bryan Kohberger investigation. And I did a whole video on it yesterday, and there's still a lot to get to in the reports, but I went through them all yesterday and at least got the what I found to be the most interesting and important things I didn't know. But within the new reports, there was a police report about Bryan Kohberger being in the Latah County Jail. Within the reports, there was a one interview that they did with another inmate in the Latah County Jail. That's where Bryan Kohberger was when he started out, right after being arrested in Moscow before his case got moved to Ada County. And they did an interview with an inmate there, which I thought was really interesting. And I thought I'd read it to you guys. I read some of it in my video yesterday, but now that everybody's talking about this video and the behavior that Kohberger is exhibiting, I wanted to read you this full.
So it's, people are fascinated by prisons. I don't know why, because they're some of the most boring places on this earth. But people are fascinated, I think, because they see human beings in cages. And for some reason, people find that, I don't know, fascinating in some way. And almost like, does a human being really belong in a cage? Well, people that are in prisons did things to earn that cage, to get put in that cage, to live the life that they're living. And so don't feel sorry for the prisoner. Feel sorry for the prisoner's victims. But I'm amazed that people are always just so enamored with seeing people inside prisons. Mike?
Yeah, Bill, I think it's because it's so unnatural, and the vast majority of people have no experience with it, being, in a jail cell overnight, or in a county, that a local jail cell or county jail or in a prison. And so they always wonder what it's like, and then you see the Hollywood version of what it's like, from the old Jimmy Cagney, George Raft movies in the 30s to Shawshank Redemption and all these other movies. It's just so unnatural. And I think people like the macabre. It's so different and so unnatural. I think it really just has like a built-in audience for people. Yeah,
I agree. This was some video on Court TV of Kohberger when he respectfully declined to make a
coming
statement.
to light about Kohberger and his phone activity after the murders, according to people.com. The quadruple killer called mom multiple times after killing Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. According to a forensic expert, Heather Barnett, she analyzed his phone and his devices. He called his mother at 6:17 a.m. on November 13th, 2022. That's less than 2 hours after the murders. Then again, for 54 minutes at 8:03, when he returned to the crime scene, you remember, in the 9 o'clock hour. He's on the phone with his mom while he's back at the crime scene. So a question to our panel today is, what's going on with mom? And he calls her mother. In fact, mother and father are what he has in his phone for his parents. Here to discuss, Prosecutor Anton Bell, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey.
I'm not going to hear what they have to say. We could talk about that. So bizarre. Terry K from the chat, thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. Love your live shows. Terry K, thank you so much. We love going live. It's not always possible every day to do so, but we love going live. And it's very challenging to go live, to have all you guys in the chat and to try to keep the show going and keep the show interesting. But Mike, what we're learning about BK, it just makes you believe that, there's no doubt he was going to become a serial killer. If he had not been caught for this mass murder of 4 young college students, and he would have gotten away with this, he would have killed again, no doubt.
Absolutely. He wanted to know what it was like so badly. He couldn't control his impulses, and he's out there in Washington. He's surrounded by all this information. He just wants to know. Like other people, like, okay, this would be interesting. Dennis Rader's interesting. Ted Bundy's interesting. Whatever happens to be. But it's interesting in a cerebral way, not in an emotional way. You think more about the poor people who were killed by Ted Bundy or Brian or Berkowitz or somebody like that. You don't think about how it would be like to be the killer. This guy flips the script. He's all obsessed about it, and he definitely, if he had gotten away with it, he would probably settle down for a while, like the BTK killer, and then sooner or later, 6 months later or a year later, he would get all compulsive and all out of control about some other girl, and he would go after her. Yes, he has the makings of a serial killer, 100%.
100%. This is one of Kohberger's professors was a woman named Catherine Ramsland, who taught him in his master's degree program. And I find this a little bit bizarre, but these people are coming out of the woodwork.
Talking about other cases, but she's been very, very careful not to talk about Kohberger because of the trial, because she was going to be a witness at the trial, and she now feels comfortable to open up to us. And we've got so many questions, Dr. Ramsland, that I've got so many questions I've wanted to ask you for so long. I want to start with, how did you first meet Bryan Kohberger? What classes of yours was he in?
Okay, I want to be just clear that I'm still within the FERPA limitations that protect students and student information. So I will talk within that. I met him in the fall of 2018 when he came to DeSales University. He had an associate's degree, and he was going to get into our 4-year program as a psychology major. He selected the forensic track, which made him an advisee for me because I managed the forensic track. And he was also in my class that semester.
And Dr. Ramlison talks about FERPA. I should have mentioned that there's a law, it's a federal law, I believe, that she is not allowed to talk about certain aspects of a student, their grades, certain parts of their academic life. It's almost like a HIPAA. So she's going to tell us what she can, but unless Bryan Kohberger signs off, she's legally not allowed to talk about certain elements of his academic career. So just keep that in mind if there's some things that Dr. Ramsland can't answer. What was your perception of him?
He seemed like eager to be in the classroom. He was polite. He was respectful, intense, and curious. And there was no reason for me to think that he was anything other than someone who was really interested in this potential career.
Was there anything looking back now that was strange about him or that you noticed?
When I look back, there really isn't anything that stood out to me. I think when you're a teacher, your instinct is to accept students at face value. You don't, start with suspicions or, and there really weren't any red flags. He was always really quite respectful and grateful. He would thank me for things. He was attentive. He would do the work. I didn't have any concerns.
I think it was 4 classes that you taught him in. What were those classes?
There were 3 undergraduate courses in the forensic track that I taught, and he was in all of them. Well, one was Introduction to Forensic Psychology. Another was my death investigation class, which was called Psychological Sleuthing. And the third one was called Dangerous Minds, the Psychology of Antisocial Behavior. And then he got into the graduate program in criminal justice for a master's degree. And he took a course with me called Behavioral Criminology.
Is there anything, Dr. Ramsland, when you look back and you think about the curriculum of those classes, and not getting into his specific experience, but when you think about what you taught in those classes that you think, oh my gosh, he may have used that in what he's now accused of doing here in Idaho?
Well, the antisocial behavior course involves serial killers and mass murderers, and we do a lot of case analysis. I use two books that I wrote. One was written with the BTK killer, whom you just mentioned, and his decision process and the crimes and how he thought about them and felt about them and what was it like for him, to be caught. So that's a very intense book. And also I have one called The Mind of a Murderer, which was about various behavioral experts over the past century who interviewed killers, mass murderers, and serial killers to get as close as possible, spending a lot of time with them to get as close as possible to their process of becoming a criminal. And so he would have been exposed to that. I think some of now looking back, I would look at maybe some of the things that interested him as being, something that gives me pause. But we always have to think about, we all know, everyone in this field, forensic psychology and criminology, know that we could have students who might become offenders.
So, that's first of all got to be one of the most darkest areas of study. And for that matter, one of the darkest areas to teach for a professor. Imagine studying this every day as your life. And, we've had on Dr. Joni Johnson, who is a forensic psychologist from the West Coast, brilliant woman. And I wonder sometimes how she works in that field, because she interviews some of these savages in prison, And of course, I can use the word savage because I used to be a cop. It's one of the favorite words of a cop. But, you can't think of them in those terms when you're a forensic psychologist. You got to speak to them on their level, and the way detectives speak to perpetrators. You have to speak to them with respect. But it still must take a psychological toll on the specific professor.
Yeah, Bill, you could see that Dr. Ramsland is sitting there, and she, as she even said, you have to accept you have to meet students where they are. They may be odd, they may be shy, they may be open, maybe gregarious, they may be very quiet. They don't want to share their thoughts. They don't want to participate, and you try to get them, everybody, to a point where there is some sort of participation, some sort of give and take going on. But understand that kids come to school from various experiences, not the same as you. You're the professor. This is what you do for a living, and they're coming in and they're learning what the field is all about. And some will act a little bizarre. Their personalities are very different, and you take them and try to do the best you can with them. Some people occasionally will strike you as, that's weird. I've had some students who have been arrested, and that's the way it goes. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nobody would expect that. Looking back now, she's like, yeah, there's certain things that he may have said or may have been really interested in. I should have seen it. But hindsight is always 20/20. But at the time, Dr. Ramsland has all these other students that she's teaching and academically advising. And so, for what he would say or do in her class, probably really wasn't different, alarmingly so at all, very mainstream, to what the other students were saying and writing and thinking and volunteering in class. So she probably does have a burden that she feels that she should have seen more, but she probably, saw him as he was then. That's 2018. That's probably very different from Bryan Kohberger, 2022. Very different person.
100%. Ashley Vestal, maybe people who pursue this major should be psychologically evaluated first. I agree with you. They should be, because it definitely could take a toll on you. It's look, one of the things, just to give you some idea, an NYPD homicide detective has to attend the autopsy of his case of the homicide victim. Many people wouldn't want the job just because of that. Watching an autopsy is nasty. It's very nasty. And that is a requirement on the NYPD of the homicide squad. You go to the ME's office and you attend the autopsy, because if this case goes to trial, they're going to ask you questions about the autopsy, not the pathologist. They're going to ask you, what did the pathologist tell you? What did you observe? So all of those things. So being a homicide detective takes its psychological toll also. Folks, so much new information out on this case. And the more information we get, it just convinces all of us how guilty BK is and was. And anyone at this point that is still sympathetic to him should share a cell with him, because it's ridiculous to think that he's innocent, he was framed, it's just absolute nonsensical to think that way. Anyway, I want to thank everyone. Mike, first your final thoughts, then I'll go to my closing.
I think all of the information that's coming out now just really reinforces the fact that all the rumors that we heard, a little bit, a little here and a little there, it was all true. It was all true. And it's really sad that we're getting denial from some areas of law enforcement, like the district attorney's office, that doesn't make any sense. But for anybody who thinks there's a little scintilla of a possibility that Kohberger was innocent, no. Prisoner 163214 was not set up. The DNA wasn't planted. Nothing like that. No, please. He's right where he deserves to be, and he's totally guilty of the crime that he committed. He even admitted it.
Absolutely. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. hit the like button, share us with your friends and family, and make lots of comments. We'll be continuing to cover this case as new information comes in. But as we said, we presented this case from every possible angle. And you don't see many pro-burgers anymore because they've moved on into the, the irrelevant content creators on YouTube. But there was numerous of them. Really, they should hang up their shingle somewhere else because they have no credibility whatsoever. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.